Good evening. My name's Elizabeth Saywick, and as the director of the UBC School of Nursing, I am so pleased to welcome you to our 57th annual Marion Woodward Lecture and Symposium. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. And to start us off in a good way, we're honored to have Elder Thelma, Elder Art, and Felicia Stogan of the Musqueam First Nation with us today to share a territorial welcome.
Good evening, Good evening, my dear people. My English name is Thelma Stogan. My ancestral name is Loch Leoch, which was handed down to me by my grandma on my mom's side. I want to start off by welcoming you all to the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish people, but you are actually on the Musqueam territory. And so I just would like to I'm going to give my brother and my granddaughter, my granddaughter's going to sing a beautiful song for you, and my brother's going to give him a chance to say a few words also. Haichka, all my relations.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Arthur Stogan Sr., elder from the Musqueam First Nations, and we're here tonight to welcome you all into the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh shared territories. It's an honor for us to be here tonight. You know, I thank the ones that asked us to come down because, you know, we travel so much, and it's such an honor for us to, you know, to do this kind of a welcoming, especially into the territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territory. We traveled so much as children. We never seen our own parents. You know, our children and grandchildren always ask, why can't we stay home with them? That's the same thing we asked our parents when they were doing the same work that we're doing today. So it's a very, very honor for us to be here tonight, to welcome you all. And before we leave, I always ask the mighty Creator to put his hands upon each and every one of you so that you get home to your loved ones. So I want to say thank you, Haichka in our language. Raise our hands in such. Haichka, Siamanchai, Haichka.
OCM, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here and allowing us to open up the space in a good way. You know, we all have our own ways of opening up a event, but to have to start off a good day, you know, by singing, you're calling your ancestors into your spaces with you. You know, I always make sure I pray to my late grandmother. You know, that's my name that was given to me. She handed it down to me and my eldest sister. You know, it's Squelch to Not, but everybody knows me as Felicia. And I just like to raise my hands. You know, thank you for taking your time out of your day to come and witness the work that's on their hearts and their minds. Now, as I sing the song, I'm going to ask you to pray to your own ancestors, because you never know with today's world, we could be going through a hard time and not even know it. That little bit of prayer goes a long way. You know, working with my grandparents, we do shaman work, which you would know it as Indian doctors, you know, working with the spirits. You guys work from the outside in and we work from the inside out. That's the way my grandma always phrases it. And it's really true. Because we've helped so many people. There's a lot of people that would be saying, oh, the doctor said we have only a couple more days for this one to live. We go and brush them off. And they're here for a long time after. And a lot of the doctors are saying, wow, what did you do? Can you get them to come back? But this is the work that was handed down to us. That's why I'm able to learn on the side of my grandparents. It's handed down from generation to generation. You know, and I'm so ever grateful to be learning on the side of them. You know, a lot of my friends and family are going down the wrong path. When you're on this kind of path, doing this kind of work, you got a long, long life ahead of you. You know, I'm just going to sing this song called Ocean Sunset. No, I raise my hands again. Thank you all again. Haichka.
Oh, hey, oh, oh, hey, oh, oh, hey, oh, oh, hey, oh, 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 hey, oh, hey, oh, hey,
Heitzapewith Mishtimuch Haichka Siam Nasiya Heitzapewith Haichka.
You know, my dear ones, Felicia is my granddaughter. I'm so proud of her. You know, it doesn't matter where we go. She's such a young girl. You know, I know her great-grandparents are very, very proud of her for what she does. And she explained the kind of work that we do. You know, and that's why I was saying earlier, you know, it was hard for us to accept our parents traveling all the time, but we're the ones that are traveling now, and it's our children and grandchildren that are asking why we can't stay home with them. I haven't been so proud of my granddaughter, you know, that, you know, I have 22 grandchildren, but Felicia's the only one that comes out and does this kind of work with us. I'm so proud of her. So I want to thank each and every one of you again for being here, and may you have a wonderful evening.
22 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren.
Haichka Osiem Asiem. Thank you, Elder Thelma, Elder Art, and Felicia Stogan for your warm, wonderful territorial welcome and your song. We are really grateful to be here, gathered here today. Now I would like to invite my colleague, Dr. Emily Jenkins, who's a professor and the Associate Director of Research and Teaching Scholarship here at our UBC School of Nursing, to introduce our symposium panelists.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So as Elizabeth mentioned, tonight is the 57th annual Marion Woodward Lecture. Over the past several years, we have worked to specifically highlight scholars from the UBC School of Nursing whose work intersects in various ways with the topic of the Marion Woodward Lecture keynote speaker. And so it's my privilege tonight to introduce our panelists. We have Dr. Bernie Garrett, Associate Professor, UBC Nursing. I think you can come up and join me here, Bernie. Dr. Lillian Hung, Associate Professor and Canada Research Chair in Seniors Care, UBC Nursing. Dr. Almost. Sorry, Ash Scott, Associate Professor of Teaching, UBC Nursing. And our special guest, Dr. Charlene Chu, Associate Professor, Faculty of Nursing, University of Toronto. So we thought that instead of me reading out a bio, we'd try to make it a little more interesting, and I'll invite the panelists to introduce themselves and also to tell us a bit about what brought them to their work related to AI in nursing. So I'll start with you, Bernie. Do you want to?
Sure. Oh, shall I use that one? Hi, and thanks for your interest. So, yeah, I started off working with technology. I used to be a renal nurse and worked with a lot of technology on renal units. And computers started to come in the late 80s, 90s, and I started being quite interested in what they could do. And so then I followed up with my sort of own academic work and did a PhD in computer science. And in the very early days of then, what was known as AI was something called expert systems. And the current forms of AI, which we have with neural networks, were just sort of only just arising, and people didn't really know what they could do. But here we are now, sort of 20 years later, and the technology's advanced to the stage where AI is now mainstream. And so I've certainly followed it and been very interested in how it's developed and where it's going in the future.
This is working, right? And I am interested in AI mainly because I started with robots, and people who knows me that I work with robots, and Mario's here. Mario is my patient partner that we work closely together, and we bring all kinds of really fun robots to long-term care, and these robots are AI enabled. So we're very interested in looking at what might be some of the problematics and what might be some of the implications and how these robots could support people and what might be some of the things that we have to pay attention to. And that's mostly the kind of the AI that I was interested in.
So I've always been really interested in technology. Just in general, my first nursing job was as an ICU nurse. So I've always been comfortable being surrounded by technology and supported by technology in my work. And I guess I first became interested in AI when there was the explosion of large language models, and everyone was like, wow, look at these, what are these going to be able to do for us? So I started to think how they could maybe support our work as nursing educators. And then I started to think more carefully about clinical simulation and how maybe AI could be used to make simulation more realistic and responsive for students. So for the last couple of years, I've led the development of an AI-driven virtual reality simulation for nurse practitioner students to practice complex clinical conversations. So taking a history from a patient and having to make decisions, deal with patient emotion, all in the moment, and getting feedback on that. So that's kind of my work I've been doing.
Hello. Oh, hello, everyone. My journey into technology and AI really started after my PhD or during my PhD. I think like Ash, I was always really interested in technology, but not in, I would say, like a meaningful way. And my PhD was in designing interventions for older adults with dementia in long-term care. And for my dissertation, we designed a person-centered intervention that would deliver physical activity for older adults who had moderate to severe dementia. And we had great results. It was a pilot study, it was a feasibility study. And when I went to defend my PhD, the examiner at the time said, Charlene, you have really good results, but how would you scale this? It was this many hours, it was this intensive. How would you think about scaling this across Ontario, across Canada? And at the time, I was kind of thinking about mobilizing, volunteer networks, or thinking about leveraging other resources in order to scale interventions. But really, when I started to think about it, it was around the use of technology. And so when I finished my PhD, I did my postdoc in an AI lab. And it was at the Toronto Rehab at the Faculty of Medicine and Occupational Therapy at U of T. And I was the one nurse in this AI lab. And I got to work with roboticists and software engineers and biomedical engineers. And I was really very lucky to be part of this amazing interdisciplinary team where I got to serve as this bridge between technology and making it work for the patient, and how we can look at it from a person-centered perspective. And then when AI was basically blew up over the last few years, AI to some degree is a different way that you can think about how you can personalize different interventions, different technologies. And so I've really just followed my passion in that way. So that's my story.
Thank you all. I feel like today has provided an opportunity to learn new things about colleagues that I've worked with for many years and the work that they're interested in, and also to meet new people and hear about the work that's happening more broadly. So I've really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed those introductions and learned something new as well about some of our UBC faculty. Bernie, I wanted to turn to you and start us off with a question about what you see as the greatest misconceptions that people have around AI and nursing.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's now becoming so mainstream. There's all sorts of ideas out there about what AI can and cannot do. I think some of the biggest sort of myths or misconceptions there are, first of all, is probably that AI understands the world like we do, because it doesn't. It mimics human behaviors, in this instance, human intelligence and cognitive processes, but it doesn't understand the world. And there was an interesting thought experiment that was done by a philosopher called John Searle in the 80s who suggested it, the idea that it's called the Chinese room. You may have heard of it, where the idea, the thought behind it is, if you had someone in a room with a manual how to actually interpret Chinese characters and understand all the rules for grammar, syntax to go with Chinese language, Mandarin, for example, then you had someone on the other side of the room outside who couldn't see them but passed them messages with Chinese symbols under the door, and then they looked them up and created a response to the message. If they did that, could you say that person understood Chinese? And so the idea is, of course, no, they don't. They're following a set of rules, and it's a really good one to look at when we look at AI today. What computers do, they don't do it in the same way as we understand the world. They're algorithms. The other point, I think, myth that's important to take on is AI is not objective. People think of AI as objective. It isn't. It is based on data sets which have huge amounts of data, as we know, drawn from various sources, sometimes without people's permission, as we know now. And it can incorporate biases, as we know, and I'll talk about that later. The other thing is that AI will deliver better outcomes automatically in healthcare. There's often a belief that, it's the latest technology, it's amazing what it can do, and so we're going to have better outcomes. That's not going to be the case. It won't do it automatically. It'll have to be managed very carefully, as with any new technology, as we saw with social media. That doesn't always give us better outcomes, as we know. And lastly, the last couple of things, I think, AI, sort of the myth that AI can work without human oversight. It can't. We need to oversee what's happening, and it needs to get accurate results and use it effectively. And the other one is that AI will take our jobs. Well, every time there's been a new technology of any kind, and going back to the Luddites and smashing up mills in because the mill workers didn't want the new machines that use the mills. Anytime that we have changes in jobs, and the jobs we have now today, for example, very much. Quite a few of them weren't even predicted 20 years ago. So jobs will change, things will change, but certainly in nursing, there's a need for personal touch and personal communication. And I think nursing is one of the occupations where we're not going to see AI take jobs away so much, but more it'll change the nature of how we work. And I guess the last one is that everybody's worried about, is AI going to take over the world and become sentient? And that's a big question. It's regarded generally as a myth, but it is something to be concerned about given the way AI is developing and the speed with which things are developing. If we think now, for example, the human brain, I think it's got 86 billion neurons in it. So it's pretty impressive, whereas your average AI system's only got 100 million. So we've got a long way to go before we get to that stage where with mimicking cognitive processes gets to a threat of sentience. And so it is something to be concerned about, and some very high-powered AI scientists have suggested it is a threat. But I think that's not a major concern for us at the moment.
Thanks, Bernie. And I just wanted to, mention or invite the panelists to chime in to any reactions to any of the comments that people are making as we're moving through. But perhaps, Ash, did you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we can probably agree that it's a very good mimic. And you can see why that's a myth, why people believe that it can think through things like a human person could.
Thank you. Go ahead, Charlene.
I have a spicy myth.
Oh.
And my myth is that a lot of people think AI is going to save the world. And I think that's a myth. I think that there's a lot of hype around AI, and I think it's run by a small number of very large corporations, and they use that as part of the discourse to have this digital resignation amongst different societies so that we can continue to build AI and propagate AI. And they use the draw of abundance in our world. We'll be able to solve the climate issue. We'll be able to have endless, boundless amounts of energy. We will solve every cancer. People will stop dying. We'll live forever. And I think that is a myth.
Sounds terrible. I think it goes back as well to what Bernie said about the evaluation piece. None of these tools are capable of doing anything on their own without us validating them first, which is a really important part of the work that everybody's doing, I think.
If I may add, I think in my experience, when we have those AI robots in long-term care, then I think people had a lot of phobia about what Bernie talked about, these robots going to replace the nurses and the care workers, right? But in reality, those robots actually requires a lot of care. So they not only didn't not able to replace human cares, they actually need humans to support them. And I do think that in the future, these AIs, it's going to stay, and it's like what Charlene talked about, it's exploding. Yeah, so it's being developed very quickly. So I think that it would be really important that now it's really early journey. So I think the robot brings more trouble than actual help for the human beings. But I think down the road in the future years, even 100 years later, we'll see these robots and AI in our everyday life. I think it's really important to start to think about how do we manage these AIs around our everyday life. Yeah.
Thanks, Lillian. And you've really been at the forefront of AI in terms of the use of robots in clinical spaces. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on safeguards or training that might be required to ensure their ethical application within a clinical context.
Yeah, I mentioned about a lot of trouble we actually learned that when we had the robots in long-term care, and Mario is right there, working with us, and we have used different kind of robots, and there's a lot of unintentional consequences that we never thought of. So I think one of the key lessons learned about when we do bringing these robots into long-term care in terms of safeguard and training is to work with the real people in the real settings, because otherwise you never really get to learn how to manage these things in the lab. So it was interesting that how, like, especially a lot of times that these robots have cameras, right? And I remember that this Lavot robot that we have, Mango and Kiwi, they're here, like, people like them because they're very cute. And but people didn't know that the robot, it was designed for home monitoring. So when you have the robot at home, the robot's supposed to protect your home. So when there is a stranger coming into your house, it will take a picture of the stranger, like, and then send it to the owner. Okay, you have an invader into your house, right? But the robot doesn't know, right? When they go out to the public, like, it's invaders everywhere. These are all strangers. So it could randomly take a lot of pictures without consent from the public. What we do is we turn off the camera. So it's really about, like, learning about what might be the safety risk and how do we mitigate those risks, right? There's when we work with the long-term care home, when we work with people, we try to identify the risk, and we try to work with the local people. We try to find ways, and, like, infection control is another thing. When we bring this robot to hospital, so we have to work with infection control office to make sure that we have policy and we have procedures to keep the robot safe. Yeah.
Thank you. Ash, I wanted to turn to you. So we've talked a bit about clinical practice, but I know you've been doing a lot of work in terms of the use of AI in education spaces. And I'm wondering if you could share a bit about your thoughts on the use of AI as a mechanism for building communication skills and clinical reasoning for undergrad students.
Yeah, sure. I think AI can help us create really adaptive learning experiences. So if we think about simulation as an example, because I already mentioned that's where some of my work lies. If we think of traditional simulation, it's highly scripted. So we have our lesson plan, which gives us the structure, and then associated with that, we might have kind of a physiological script. So the signs and symptoms, the patient or virtual patient, whatever type of simulated patient we're working with, will exhibit as we move through the simulation. But we'll also have kind of the verbal script, which are the responses that the student's going to receive based on their questioning of the patient. And there might be simulationists in the room who disagree with me, but my feeling is when students have done that kind of highly structured, scripted scenario, that's it, it's done. They know it, they know what's going to happen. There's not any great value in repeating that same thing over and over, and it's a lot of work to develop this kind of thing. With AI, and in particular large language models, we can have the same underpinning clinical scenario, the same patient involved in the scenario, but the AI can change the situation based on the conversation as it unfolds. So the student can say something slightly different, and the whole relationship between the simulated patient and the student is very different. So there's like a million opportunities for us to be using this to our advantage, because it also gives students the opportunity to engage in really effective repetition. So they can go back into the same scenario over and over. And in terms of kind of improving communication skills, they can really learn how a subtle change in their phrasing or change in their tone when they engage with the patient can have huge implications for how that scenario unfolds and how the relationship they build with the patient moves forward.
Thank you. Charlene, did you have a reaction?
I think that's fantastic work. I think that the another application around AI for undergraduates, I think it's beneficial in terms of VR, and I know we have some VR experts on the panel here, but in terms of democratizing different experiences for undergrads, I think it's really important. Not everybody gets a chance to engage in a recess. Not everybody gets a chance to have a difficult conversation, but you can mimic that in using a VR environment. And so I think that it democratizes exposure, and maybe those who use VR can speak more to that.
I think that's a huge opportunity when, like, at the area that I worked on is dementia care, and like what Ash talked about, sometimes like those high risk patient care situations, and when sometimes maybe like crisis situations when someone who is very agitated, and like how do you train a person? Because that might not happen in the everyday nursing care, right? So if you have to wait for those moments to happen, then then it's really hard to do solid training. But the advantage of having the technology, you can expose a person over and over again, so the person can gain confidence. And it's safe. It's okay to make mistakes, right? And I think there's really real opportunity in having this immersive technology like, enabled by AI. Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think that's absolutely right. We can create these safe places to fail, which is where we know that learning can really, really happen. And also, often we don't need a human educator to be present at the time. So the student can get feedback from the AI within the scenario itself and can not have the potential. They can really fully engage in the scenario because they're not embarrassed because their friends are watching or there's an instructor watching. But I was also thinking about the accessibility piece, Charlene, how you mentioned that not everybody gets to engage in a full high-fidelity simulation of a resuscitation or see it in practice, etc. But I do think there is some question around the feasibility of making this kind of technology available to when we have such huge cohorts of students. The technology is expensive, it needs maintaining, developing things is expensive. So I think the accessibility thing is like a two-sided coin.
So you've identified accessibility as an issue, Ash, but overall, you've all spoken about the opportunities that AI presents within the context of undergraduate nursing education. And I wanted to turn back to you, Bernie, and just ask the question, what do you think are the unintended or potential consequences that might result from an over-reliance on AI in nursing education or practice?
Well, it's a very good question, and I think first of all, I'd say I'm a great proponent of AI. I think AI has got massive potential to improve the condition, but like the human condition, but like any new technology that we've seen, I tend to worry that regulation and the ethics behind its use falls behind it. And we've seen that with the introduction of broadcast media and television, social networking software. I mean, that started off looking very positive, and now we do have some issues, obviously, with that. But I guess for AI, there are a number of concerns. I suppose from an ethical perspective in terms of healthcare, I do worry a little bit, as I mentioned, about bias in the systems. For example, even we've got large language models we're talking about and text-based, but also in the imaging, the ones which people are using a lot now to create images. If you ask it, for example, to create an image of there was an article of a woman with a disability who asked it to create an image of her, and it couldn't do it because it had been trained, the image software had been trained on people who have 4 limbs and walk around on ambulatory. So there are sort of biases we don't even perceive in the system because of the way it's been trained with the data it uses to train it. Other concerns, I mean, particularly obviously in healthcare, cybersecurity is a huge issue. We all worry about data. Scams are just going through the roof, and we're seeing people, I'm sure everybody in this room has been phoned up with some scammer at some time or received an email. And of course, AI is going to sort of facilitate that. And we've seen that with scams now using AI of people's voices to try and scam people out of money with their relatives, pretending that it's somebody who needs money urgently, a son, a daughter, or a parent. So, but in healthcare, obviously, the security of data is paramount, and AI may introduce problems there as well, we might see. And that leads on to privacy, obviously, privacy of data and intellectual property right. They're big issues at the moment in the discussions about AI. We saw the AI actress being produced, was it Tilly Norwood, who was in the paper a few weeks ago and in the media about, an AI constructed actor. And of course, a lot of actors are complaining about the fact that, their imagery or their data was being used to create and model this. virtual actor. But obviously in healthcare as well, privacy of information, and who owns that information and how is it being used to train AI models. Are patient records eligible to be used for training AI? There's a lot of questions we need to answer about that. And also, I guess there's a big concern I really have is it's going to be used for misinformation. We already see how social media is used for that. Magical cures we saw in the COVID pandemic, all sorts of horrendous things going around on social media, from myths about the virus has been created as part of an experiment to wipe people out, right through to miracle cures. And of course, AI makes it a lot easier to fake things and make things look very realistic. So particularly in healthcare, I think that's going to be a serious concern. We're already starting to see AI being used, for example, to manipulate images and things like that for research projects. So, there are some serious concerns as well as all the positives, I guess.
Anybody want to respond to that?
I absolutely agree, and I have received those emails to buy a gift card, and my students have received those emails that there's an urgency that they need to go buy those gift cards. It is scary because the AI make it like so real. So it's really hard to detect sometimes, like using the person's voice and the images, the potential harm that the AI can enable, the harm, yeah. So I think that's very concerning, yeah.
Thank you, Lillian. I was going to follow up with another question for you about the research that you've done with undergraduate nursing students and what you see as their perceptions of the use of AI in their nursing education or in their future practice.
I was very fortunate that I had a student. Her name is Michelle. She's our undergrad BSN student, and she's brilliant. And she helped to lead this study to look at the class, the undergrad nursing class, and what they think about using AI in their academic work, mostly ChatGPT in writing. And she just published this paper this year in the Canadian Journal of Nursing, being the first author. So yay, Michelle. So in the paper that she reported, like there's three main themes. So the first one is that the nursing students are really, they understand the AI is here and the future nursing will have AI. So it can be a supportive tool, but they think about like how the tool can help them to kind of brainstorm ideas and help them with their academic work. But the other theme is that they also have real fear and concerns about how by over-reliance and overuse the AI could really damaging the skill and de-skilling of the training on the foundational knowledge of nursing. So there was really a lot of students talked about that in the focus group. And so it was very clear that the nursing students really wanted to have proper guidance so that they learn how to use it in a safe and ethical way. And there was also a student that talked about inequity. And they see some students are very good at using the AI. They have access to AI, then they get better grades. And other students that they didn't have a chance to learn and they don't know how to use it, and they found that they are disadvantaged. So I think that, again, I really think that the AI will be there in the future. So we need to get ahead of the game to manage those harm that, the scam's going to come, and also the potential harm that they're going to create, and how we are going to mitigate the risk and provide better support as educator for our nursing students, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're at a time now where we really need our institutions to be coming up with some concrete guidance over what is okay and what's not okay, because I can feel the anxiety from students about getting caught out for doing the wrong thing when they think they're doing the right thing and using something in a way that they thought was appropriate that isn't. And that, I have many fears about the skills that students could lose from using AI, but I'm also conscious that it is a great field leveler for people and kind of reduces some inequities. But I think we definitely need to be giving students more guidance on what is appropriate and what is not. I feel like I need more guidance from my institution and other institutions about what is okay.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was like, I feel like everybody needs more guidance, potentially how to use it in education. And I was just going to reflect on what you had brought up, Lillian, around even for students who don't want to use it and they want to actually read the papers and prepare for class in the way that we all used to read papers and prepare for class. And then when they go to class and then all of their friends and peers have all done the ChatGPT version, they feel like, oh, like I should have done that too. And so they actually don't, and then in the class, if they feel like they don't perceive the benefit to have done that, then I think it undermines their effort. And then they feel like, oh, I could have done it the other way and it would have been easier the other way. And then I think a different point that I'd add to that is I was speaking to one of my undergrads that came to my office, and I normally teach in the grad program. So when I went in and I taught this undergrad program, I was really surprised at the number of students that were using it. And maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. And the way in which that they were using it, where they had it open on all of their screens, but they had the lecture slide open. Are there students here? Are there profs here? So they had the lecture slide open, and then they had ChatGPT open on the other side. And instead of asking the prof, they would just ask ChatGPT. And I didn't realize that that's what they were doing. And when I inquired about that, they said that it was a lot easier to ask ChatGPT because they just felt so much social anxiety about phrasing the question in the wrong way or looking like they don't know anything in front of their peers. And so it allowed them to engage with the material in a different way that they felt safe. And so I understood that. I didn't realize it at the time, but I get that, right? So there's so many facets to how we shape and utilize ChatGPT in education.
And I think we have to be clear as well that students are going out into whatever industry, not just healthcare, and employers are using AI in the work, and they're expecting students to know how to engage with it. So it can't just be no, this is a banned thing, we don't talk about it, you don't use it, you do it the old way. We have to get to grips with the new way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, preparation.
I think we're heading into the tail end of our conversation, and that was a nice segue, I think, to help us close off our time together in thinking about that this is our current reality, and we imagine that it's going to become even more present in the years moving forward. What would you give, if you could, each reflect on advice that you might give to nurses who are heading into an AI-rich environment around their practice and how to be best prepared?
Shall I go? I'm thinking about kind of the mindset that I think students need. I think we need student nurses to be curious about technology. We want them to engage with new technologies and see something and say, not be afraid of it, but say, oh, how can this tool potentially help me provide a better standard of care? But we also want them to be critical. So we want them to ask questions, be aware of the bias and the limitations that AI has. And just to remember that whilst AI can be there to support us in our work as nurses, it's not going to hold the hands of a dying patient and help that person know that you're there with them and for them in that moment. AI is not going to teach them how to do that, and it's not going to help them do that in the moment. So we need to be developing a whole range of skills and not just focusing on the easy route that AI can sometimes provide or make us think it's providing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I think the genie is out the bottle. AI is here to stay. It's doing, it has amazing potential and can certainly help with students in their journey through programs and becoming a nurse. But at the same time, they do need to be critical thinkers, and so getting them to question any source of where they're getting their data and information from, whether it's AI or a journal, and adapting obviously to understanding that AI doesn't have all the answers, and they should question any source of information that they get. So, yeah, I agree with Ash.
Yeah, I think it's really the human centeredness, right? So we need to understand that we are the human and the AI, it's the tool. So don't let don't run too quickly, like just copy and paste whatever the AI say, and like what Bernie talked about, using critical thinking, and be the, use the tool as to help us to have enhance our life and enhance the patient care. But don't let that, I think it's very concerning about the potential harm these AI can do. So what Bernie talked about, the critical thinking, would be really important, yeah.
So I agree with all of the panelists. I think an additional point that I would make is I think one of the key parts for us as educators is to instill a love of learning, actually, in our children and in our students. What we know as AI today will continue to change, right? Like our students are going to graduate, AI is going to look totally different, and it looks different depending on what institution they're at, what hospital they're at, what province they're at. And so I think it's about having nurses that are practicing, that are caring, but that are lifelong learners. And that comes alongside before AI, right? No matter what unit you worked on, no matter where you were a lifelong learner, and that was something that you embraced. And I think AI is the exact same way.
Thank you. Thank you all for participating in our panel, and thank you for joining us. We're going to wrap up this session now. It's nearly 6 o'clock. We're going to move into the atrium for dinner, and hopefully this conversation has sparked some interest and you can continue to engage with the panelists and each other over dinner, discussing the topic of AI and nursing. We are going to reconvene here at 7 o'clock. For those of you who are joining online, you can either stay online or rejoin using the same link at 7 p.m. Our dinner tonight is provided by Tabai, if I'm Tabe. They provide a Syrian dinner. It's a boxed dinner with the intention of you being able to move around and have conversation and visit. So we hope you enjoy that. There is a cash bar, and you are welcome to bring your drinks back into this room when we start at 7 p.m. And we have a photographer here, and she's going to be capturing some of the moments during our break time. If you would prefer not to be captured on camera, please just let us know. And I think that's all of the housekeeping. So we'll see everybody back here at 7 p.m. and we hope you enjoy the forthcoming session with Charlene.